Blessed love and peace. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allah wabha. 道可道非常道，名可名非常名。Jah Rastafari. Deus noster qui es in cielo, sanctificato nomen tuum, vaheguru sanam. Baruch atah Elohim Eloheinu melech haolam, shehekol nihya b'divaro. Amen. Kyrie eleison, sevam mastu savegatehe save sata bhavantu sukhidata. Vagabia. Aqua ba upendo namani, fakir nisanami, chinda dan termel, lebov me womajiga. Ubuntu shabanda fakithka. Session, como se mira, domo arigato, pilama yellow, walk and talk, dokushingun, gomanigat. God, we thank you for all that you bless us. Ata jamia etafanami, bado, aho, nom shanti, 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 amen. Not the most advisable to drink a whole lot of water before going to sleep. But hey, we got addenda to the brethren that we talked about before. I mentioned before some of like the characteristics of like the telltale signs of an authentic cause and platform, viable, authentic solutions for long-term well-being, and not just assimilating and having a further advantageous position in imperialistic comforts and competitions. So particularly imperialism that is explicitly racist, classist, and genocidal to one's own kinfolk. It's not a long process into equality within that. It's out, get out. And particularly when taking a militant stance of throwing under the bus, get out. So an additional joint to be mindful of further telltale signs of authenticity or the lack thereof. Again, we support the cause of education. We should support the cause of the support and the advocacy and the concentration on young black brethren, boys and youth, as well as black sistren, girls and youth. That being said, as important as education is, that's only a part of the puzzle. It's only a part of the challenge. The solution, the necessity, is a comprehensive package. Village, residence, food source, whether it's organic agriculture or supply chains or otherwise. It's comprehensive, it's economic and otherwise. Education, that's still a piecemeal. It's only a part of it. And the rest of that people's needs being provided from the system leaves the entirety of it leveraged. Unduly, excessively, woefully leveraged, particularly amidst the genocidal conditions that brethren are describing existing. In that type of state of emergency, you talk about mixed people being part of this genocide of black folk, but then you're just talking about only starting a school in those conditions. It's not logical. It doesn't add up. If somebody is that knowledgeable and conscientious and honest about talking about the emergencies and blaming certain people for that, but at the same time only doing part of a solution and then everything else is still the status quo as usual, that don't add up, yeah. It's a comprehensive. If it's a state of emergency, it's a comprehensive state of emergency. It's not just a matter of school. You need school. You need apartment, residential accommodations for people, villages, for all the families, parents, friends, associates of the children who are learning. You need the whole thing. Security, food, clothing, materials to make the clothing, supplies. It's a comprehensive thing. If we're gonna be knowledgeable and speak about that and be militant about it and blame people for that, throw people under the bus, or it's obviously just propaganda, and you don't actually believe in what you're saying, or you don't care about what you're saying. Ooh, I'm starting to talk in second person now. I gotta be mindful of that. So, and that applies to Brethren Dr. Umar Johnson and the brain trust around him. Where's the village? Where does Brethren Dr. Umar Johnson stay? How are those needs being met? Utilities, not just of the school, utilities, bank accounts. And we're not trying to call it out. We're not trying to get a piece of that. I don't have a bank account. We don't have a bank account. We haven't filed a tax report over 20 years. That's facts. People can, well, before we get on myself and all the different accusations or whatever else, it's easy to answer all that, comparatively speaking, when we're honest about it and courageous enough. That could be easier said than done, though. But continue on right here for the moment. That's another telltale sign, because the true answer is comprehensive, and that's not a pipe dream. That's not a pie in the sky dream. People say, well, that takes time. You got to build step-by-step priorities first and everything else like that. No. Bullshit. That's pimp talk. That's excuses. That's imperialist propaganda runaround. Because all the abandoned buildings that exist at this moment can easily be forwarded and stewarded into the hands of collectives that do something with it. And that can be a step-by-step process of renovation and otherwise. But the establishment of a village can literally be overnight, in one day. We got this. All right, let's move. Let's pull through. Bring everything you got, and now this is where we stay now. One day, and you say, well, that's never going to happen. This and the other. Do you see not what happened with COVID and all the things and all the restrictions and everything else like that? That it would take such a process to do, and nobody would do that. Lockdown. What's it called? Martial law, almost. And that's extenuating circumstances. Are these not extenuating circumstances that you're talking about? Genocide and further already, let alone what is anticipated. We're not trying to hype things up. We're not trying to do this and the other, but is it not already in that situation when you speak in this way, genocide and otherwise? Do you not see what happens with Ukraine and how things get fast-tracked? I was in the refugee camp in Denmark 2 years ago, and it's a process to get into Denmark as a refugee, political asylum and otherwise. It's a tenacious process, but then all of a sudden, here come kinfolk from Ukraine. Boom, automatic acceptance. All the rules go out the window. Fast track. Was that a pipe dream? No, that was policy. Overnight policy. Not just fast-tracked, acceptance, place to stay, bank account, social security number. Overnight, just come through. Blonde hair, blue eye, one of us, here's your ticket. Everybody else, hold up. It might take years. So be careful. I mean, just be honest and know how, like, you think it's not that hard. It ain't that hard. So it's just a matter of like being tenacious, knowledgeable enough, and like have enough fortitude and willfulness. And again, that's not even the first option, the first priority that we articulate advocate. We say first, let go of citizenship ownership. And that's we can only advocate, or we can only like preach what we practice. That's what we practice. And we can talk about that further specific, I guess, if need be. We had this enough already. Before I'd have it to get some water. That's the first thing. No citizenship, no ownership, and ethical discipline, peace, sharing, chastity, honesty, sobriety. Now, that not everybody's on this. So then we say repatriation. That's the second recommendation. For militants or whatever, repatriation. That's for the basic, ordinary kinfolk. We said this years ago. We said this before COVID. We said this during COVID. When kinfolk are getting their stimulus checks and everything, that's plane fare right there. Go to Ghana. You say go to Ghana. You didn't go to Ghana. I wasn't vaccinated. I still could have gone to Ghana, and just been locked up or whatever else and deal with the consequences at that point. Could have done that. But when Ghana was saying no because they didn't control their borders because they were under the thumb of science, and wait, that might sound like I'm talking against the whole thing of repatriation. Yes and no. It's no. I mean, it's no. It's no utopia. And there are other places that are further recommended than Ghana: Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, Ethiopia. South Africa, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Botswana, and further. So that's the second thing we recommend, and we've gone through that path. We get deported back here. It's not easy. It's most likely to be accepted going to Africa than going to Europe, as I personally do. The U.S. has its tentacles in many places, and it's not even the U.S.'s tentacles. It's further machinery going on. But at the same time, there's a cost that the World Republic and the system has to pay in flexing like that, and it further erodes the foundation of that machinery as well. So it's all part of the unfolding. And then in short of going back to Africa, then what we recommend is go to Alabama. Black folk, go to Alabama. Go along Tuskegee and build up small kingdoms, village kingdoms, so that there's autonomy. The different kingpins can have their own constituencies, but at the same time, there's proximity, there's support, there's trade amidst other hostilities and competitions, and additionally. So that is the most strategic methodology of having safety in numbers, acclimatable climate. Kinfolk want to talk about what the winters are here in here, Philly, New York, whatever else. Go back south where it's further comfortable, year round. Agriculture, nature. And in doing that, there may be rednecks, there may be militia, and additionally, you can't say there's not here in Ohio at the moment. So this is very comparable. I don't know about Philadelphia, although actually I have some idea about Philadelphia, but it might not be as severe as in Ohio. But point is that as severe as red kinfolk, rednecks may be in Alabama at the moment, when things are starting to unfold and there's certain negotiations accordingly, we might find that a lot of those kinfolk who are so starch, steadfast Confederates, good old boys and everything else like that, might say, you know what, hey, let's set up shop in Ohio. We got brethren in Ohio in our white nationalist network. We set up shop in Ohio. And there may be mass exodus, even max exodus, just like with India and Pakistan, crossing paths on the way to each other's respective stomping grounds to set up. So again, the people who are on it, the people who are like the visionaries and leaders are the ones to perceive it. Most people don't have that tenacity to be able to envision that and think it plausible enough to actually implement and take initiative. So we share this particularly for those who do have that mindset, regardless of how kinfolk feel about us. And that's the other thing too. Bump us. Don't care. We don't have to have credentials or whatever else like that. Don't listen to us because of it's us. Just listen to what we share and value or devalue. Judge what we share on its merits, regardless of who we are, regardless of even what we do per se, or perhaps. But just uh, observe and evaluate the substance of what we communicate and let that speak for itself. So, um, regardless of what we're perceived as or otherwise, let the words speak for themselves. So, that's the third thing that we recommend is going to Alabama and just concentrating in Alabama particularly. There may be other places too, but we specifically recommend Alabama for a number of different reasons. Tuskegee, along the river, and then for other than that, um, build enclaves in whatever municipality that you're attached to at this moment. It's inadvisable. That's the fourth option. However, where people's mindsets are, um, if they still want to hold on to citizenship, we've already given the recommendation. So that's all we can do is share it and then practice what we do. So, anyways, those are some of the telltale signs about discerning the authenticity, the truth within a platform and the propaganda that kinfolk communicate, particularly militant kinfolk. So when kinfolk can say, "Well, what have you done? Where's your village at? Where's your school at? What you just talked about your tent getting crushed to the ground? What you got?" Um, Indeed, touche. First of all, we're different. We're not going out there throwing people under the bus and hating on kinfolk categorically and otherwise. We call out behavior, but we're not doing all that type of stuff. Um, and again, in the decisions that we make, and not just the decisions, but the path that we proceed along, is extremely austere, and it makes things much further challenging to do basic stuff. But it also gives us the freedom to say this um, without being concerned about being in anybody's pocket. We work for the Most High. We are servants of the Most High, which means that we are servants to all kinfolk. Essentially, we're in everybody's pockets. Everybody got a hold on us. And we just be upfront about it, open about it. And we have to be disciplined about what we accept as compensation for the service that we provide in this life. Everything comes from Elohim, the Most High. Everybody else is just middle people in that process of forwarding the nutrients that we need, the energy that we need, the material energy, or the energy from material that we need in this life to do the work that we do. Everybody else is just intermediaries. The government, the corporations, the banks, the bosses, and everybody else, the gangsters. Everybody's just intermediaries. God works through everybody. God works through Inamaka, Mother Earth, to provide us the nutrients. And then those nutrients go through channels to get to us, the stores or whatever else. So, in this righteous trod, we're in everybody's pockets. We live a modest, pious lifestyle that is obligated to the well-being of all, and well-being obligated to respond to the well-being of all, including our own selves. And we're precluded from doing everything and helping everybody in every way. We have to have some discrimination, and in that discrimination, we're susceptible to inaccuracy and biases and indulgences and otherwise. However, we stay true to this trod as much as we can. So, what we have to show for it, we're not going out making big promises about taking over nations and doing everything else like that. Some of what we have to show for it is our written works, Tobadi Gokodao, our compilations and anthologies of scriptural reasoning and study materials, the original texts, holy scriptures of Tobadi Gokodao, as well as the transliterations and English versions, all side by side. These we put together a framework for civilization, for a Rastafari mixed heritage world one love civilization. We have educational materials. We have a learning program, educational program. We have a methodology of village cooperation, and additionally, so we've gone through a lot of years of study, of practice, of learning, of discovery, to find a formula for cultivating a village, not just for this generation, but for the next 7 generations. So that's what we have to show for it. It is about the physicality, about where we live and what we do at this moment, but it's also about making preparations for future generations, particularly amidst what is readily available, amidst all the hostilities and shade and kicking up dust, and additionally. And so in laying low and finding the solutions, we also immediately translate those solutions into learning materials for others to find the solutions and not have to go through everything that we went through in order to acquire this knowledge and wisdom. Let us tell it. So that's what we have to show for it. Um, and there are things that we have yet to show for it that we continue to try, that we're guided to do. And so there's kinfolk who've made fast forwards in many respects in terms of having intentional villages in Africa, in Ghana, in other places around Africa, in Ethiopia, and having organic agriculture and doing those comprehensive sets of residence and agriculture and school, and additionally, that we have yet to do. Kinfolk in other places too, repatriating to China and India and Europe and otherwise. So the kinfolk who are doing things at this moment that we have yet to do, and that we may have yet to do, because we may stay in Ohio. We have it's not up to us exclusively. There's a lot of factors and decision makers in this process. So that's some of where we're at, what we're doing, and like why we have done what we have done, what we haven't done, what we haven't done. And we don't make out sent promises. And additionally, we always say, according to the grace of the Most High, recognizing we don't control everything. We have guidance for doing certain things at this moment, and we try to be as accurate and modest in discerning that guidance and abiding by that guidance. And the focus of our guidance at the moment is being spiritual community and focusing on our deen, on our mitzvot, on our samadhi, and our daily prayers and meditation, studies, and share that with those who are similarly devoted to this trod. So that's what we do, and that's where we get the insight. That's where we get the fortitude and the liberty to have this insight and share it. And that's where we get the energy of copaceticness, to minimize any hatred towards anyone, and to optimize our genuine compassion and respect and towards all beings, our compassion and our respect. Not necessarily. Well, I'm not going to make self-deprecation about my fatigue of hair. So anyway, all right. There's a few other points to share here before I start falling asleep again. How is some water? Scratchy scratch, scratchy scratch. I want to say that's the coup again. Scratch, 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 scratch. I want to say Public Enemy, the coup. Scratch, 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 scratch. Anyway, so further again with Brother Umar Johnson. Where does he stay? Where does his brain trust stay? Do they have a village? Are they living autonomously off the grid, autonomously as non-citizens of the United States, without social security numbers and without bank accounts, with independent currency, whether it's gold, silver, or the currency of another nation, if it's not its own currency, sovereignty-wise? With the black militants and the recognition of the state of emergency, and additionally, where is that comprehensive blueprint and not just a piecemeal, partial solution that continues relying significantly in the pocket of conventional authority? Now, in terms of us, what we're doing, what we got to show, I already said some of that already. However, even further, Something else. What else we got? There's something specific. Something specific. All right, two things to share, basically. Um, Maybe another one, but we'll see on another topic. And then let's wrap this up. So, all right. Um, about myself, I'll say myself personally, without speaking about others around me. People might accuse me of saying, "Oh yeah, welfare, disability, social security, social welfare, or otherwise." May, Kinfolk can have a number of different accusations concerning how I live, where I live, how I'm supported in this and that and the other, whose pocket I'm in, who I'm working for, whether I'm a. Oh, that was the other thing. Describing President Dr. Umar Johnson as one word was stunting in terms of just like being so propaganda and everything else like that. Another word is not showboating, but putting on a show, putting on a show, um, and being put in a position to put on a show. I can be accused of doing that. Whether I am doing it intentionally, or even just like thoroughly being manipulated by others to look authentic and even pretend or have a delusion of perceiving myself as authentic, but just playing the role that others are putting up or putting me into, and like kind of manipulating me. And additionally, like that brethren who was just like that one love everybody, and was did their own song and everything, and then got recruited by drug dealers to travel to China with a load of drugs, and then got caught by the police and then executed when he was just trying to like sing a song, and thought he was getting hired to like record the song in China by these financiers or whatever, who were actually drug dealers that set him up to travel da 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 da, and left him high and dry. So Kinfolk can have the best of intentions and actually garner support and empathy because people can tell the person is being genuine, but at the same time being woefully naive. Uh, Cats are starting to pop off at the mouth now. Being woefully naive and manipulated and utilized for ulterior motives. So I can be accused of that. Um, Anybody can be accused of anything, also, and there's a whole lot of smokes and mirrors all over the place. So in terms of the money situation, I've gone into my life story on numerous occasions, and the short of it at this point is that it's there are a number of different stories, and it's a matter of who you listen to and who you believe, um, because there are a number of different stories, and it's all a matter of spin. So I think the basic, like the two basic scenarios is this. Well, first, before describing the scenarios, it's a matter like for you yourself to decide who you are and where you stand, and be honest about that. And if you are a U.S. citizen, or if you are a citizen of any other nation that is like significantly, um, like in bed with the United States, to recognize that your position is biased. You're not in a position to judge, so you're going to have a skewed perspective of how you believe things, because you're already buying into that narrative of citizenship. So you have a further bias of just listening and abiding by the story that the United States articulates in this particular circumstance. So, right there, like, we're not subjecting ourselves to your judgment on this particular thing, because if you are a citizen, you are part of the atrocity. That's facts, and you're not in a position to judge in a fair, honest way. So that being said, um, in that scenario, I'm not even going to like articulate or substantiate it. They're all different types of rationale. So um, we just we disagree with that. On our side, what we communicate is that everything, as I said before, comes from God. God creates the universe. God creates the earth. God has intentionality on how the bounties of the earth are cultivated and shared to manifest the will of God through politics, militaries, economics, social interaction and relationships, familial interaction and relationships, and additionally, through conquest and imperialism, through charity and compassion and otherwise. Everything happens according to the will of Allah, Elohim, Adonai, Brahman, Tao. So we walk a spiritual path. We are spirit beings. We're not even the same species as humans. And again, you can say, all right, that's crazy talk. That's just out the pocket. Da 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 da. That's fine, but that's your perspective. We're communicating our understanding. You have your own delusion, or no, you have your own illusion, and we have our own illusion. So, um, now that being said, everything comes from Elohim. Elohim supplies all the societies, all the civilizations, all the militaries, all the governments, and additionally, where does the government get its money from? Where does the government get its resources from? Its gold from? Its technology from? And additionally, the government is dependent upon other entities, and additionally, so the buck don't stop with the government. And we have a knowledge about that. We have influence and a leverage within that as well. We have a seat at the table, at the world table, that governs those mechanics. Our seat is very modest, but we have a seat at the table. And many people don't want to see that either. I just say, oh, that's crazy talk, this, that, and the other. That's fine. We're not trying to prove anything. But if kinfolk are going to ask questions, that's the answer. That's part of the answer that we provide. And if kinfolk accuse us of being liars or misleading or whatever else like that, is you understand the nature of the game. Again, it's like understanding like how Congress works. Congress makes laws. And so if you're going to say if something's legal or not legal or whatever else, like we make the laws. What are you talking about? So, like, anyways, we make the conditions, we make the policies about what goes on. Um, Now, that's our side. And again, you can go to the government, and the government says its side about making payments and signing contracts and all this other type of stuff through the years. The actuality is, um, I get I receive very little money. I intentionally abstain from money as much as possible, because I know the nature of money and the challenges and the detriments that come with money. Just like what the Quran teaches about alcohol and gambling, there's some benefit and a lot of harms. That's what money is: some benefit and a lot of harms. So, I, it's facts. I have not put out a RS form. People can say, well, that's because he's accused of being disability, so he doesn't have to this and the other. That's that rationalization. That's the government making its own excuses and stories and manipulations and pimp talk to cover up that side and that rationale and that pretense of authority and authoritarianism and some illusion of control. And kinfolk who have citizenship have further incentive and motivation for buying that narrative because people are attached to it. So we have another way of articulating it. So, and there are a number of different points along those lines. We can talk about leaving this country and being forcefully deported back here. Um, and is that an evidence of being a U.S. citizen, or is that evidence of U.S. oppression and stifling kinfolk who leave this continent and attach through other mechanisms of the world? The narrative of that citizenship argument becomes further and further implausible um, as the track record is further and further established accordingly. So, again, um, and that's without lying. That's because it's it's a matter of understand when one understands the game further. Everything is imagination, and it's a matter of how we decide to concentrate our imagination, um, and uh, there's that. So that's some of where we stand in this joint. I guess anything else in terms of our criticism? Where do we stay? Government facilities, and additionally, again, we've spent time in the streets. We spent time in squatting in other locations. We spent time in prisons. We spent time in other countries. So in each of these occasions, we are literally forcefully brought back here. So this is not some like private residence or whatever else or subsidized residence. This is a different phenomenon, and it becomes a sanctuary at this point through the years because of what we do by the nature of what we do. So it has its own sanctity accordingly, amidst the violations and otherwise. So again, it's a matter of what narrative you listen to, and that's your decision. But be mindful of the judgments you make accordingly, and how honest you are in doing that. So that's some of like where we're coming from, what we do, what we practice, what we preach, and how that compares to how we address what others do. The further emphasis is that we're not throwing kinfolk under the bus. We're not making categorical condemnations amongst entire groups and collectives of people. We specify, and what about you say all about the citizens? We specify criticism concerning behavior. Citizenship is a volitional behavior, and it has significant implications because it's through citizenship that severe atrocities are committed against other people in around the world and also people within the earth. There's a statistic of 4.5 million people being killed since the 11th of September by the U.S. military. Now, that's just one estimation. However, that's an example of what we are admonishing when we admonish the phenomenon of citizenship. It's not just propaganda and hype, it's an awareness of how the system works. So that's that. Now, one other thing we mentioned whilst it's still awake, and it occurs to me, is that what again, going back to Brother Dr. Umar Johnson, is that the whole issue of LGBTQ. Haven't heard Brother Dr. Umar Johnson speak too much about LGBTQ. Might be able to presume something that he might say, but at the same time can't be too presumptuous. Um, Now, I'm saying this particularly because one of the recent posts that is observed when doing that research for mixed heritage was presumably recent comments that Brother Dr. Umar Johnson makes on another brethren our age, who was recently presumably arrested for notorious activities with young people, illegal sexual exploitation, and otherwise. And without knowing the facts of the case and without unduly condemning the brethren for committing such crimes, um, what we do recognize is that the whole situation, it's not newsworthy. It's not like a priority in the community. That's not one of the causal, like the main things concerning our state of emergency and the well-being within our community. Yes, there are a lot of residential things being well. I'm pausing and talking about Cleveland Heights specifically now before I get into that. So anyways, LGBTQ. We haven't seen Brother Dr. Umar Johnson talk too much about that, and that's a concern because anytime there's an advocate who speaks so militantly and proactively about young boys and young men, we always have to, just because of how we know circumstances are today, we always have to it's always going to have some suspect. So that's before Brethren Dr. Umar Johnson. That's after Brethren Dr. Umar Johnson. But particularly in how he presents himself through the years as an advocate for young men, young boys, and additionally, that automatically draws suspect. Now we have to be very mindful of making accusations or casting dispersion or shade or making undue suggestions or otherwise. And I'm sleeping now as I'm doing this. I'm dealing with kinfolk popping off the mouth intentionally at this moment. Again, micro provocations and further. So, and kinfolk are just further susceptible towards being that type of puppetry because people, by and large, are on their intoxicants at the moment. So, that's part of what this is. We have to be careful. We have to be respectful in this way too. So, LGBTQ. We haven't heard Brethren Dr. Umar Johnson talk too much about this, and given we just saw some of the headlines about what Brethren Dr. Umar Johnson says about the brethren who recently gets arrested for in charge with sexual exploitation, and Brethren Dr. Umar Johnson speaking against those charges. Now we don't know the details all of the case and everything. We know through the years a number of the scenario, and it would be unsurprising if there were further envelopments that are further proximate with parties in question. If that makes sense. Just because that fits the scenario, we don't want that. We're not wishing that. Absolutely not. We're not trying to cast shade on Brethren Dr. Umar Johnson or anybody else, but we do consider if there is this advocacy and seemingly under advocacy. First of all, don't hate. Shall I say his name? Sean Combs. Don't hate Sean Puffy Combs. Not trying to be in that whole conversation at all, because it's not productive. It's not a priority for the community. It's gossip. So it's a bullshit conversation to discuss at all. And we're discussing it because we see the brethren, Dr. Umar Johnson, discuss it on the talking shows or whatever in recent days or weeks or whenever it occurs. So now we're enveloped in talking about it at this moment. And in the advent of there being admission of the veracity of the charges, it would not be surprising if there were, in the advent of there being admissions about, we're getting a lot of whoops now. I am falling asleep. I am being fatigued. I am going on, and now we're getting whoops. We got the honks. We're getting the chatter from the intoxications, and we begin the sirens periodically. But now it's getting pronounced. So obviously this is causing some disruption in the cipher here locally. Me doing this, which is interesting. We're still studying this but we are recognizing that this is exactly what happened when when the tent got smashed up, is that the brethren came out the woodworks, um, and communicated that hostility. So obviously, me doing this late night when I'm falling asleep talking, because that's what I'm doing right now. I'm falling asleep whilst I'm talking. That's causing a disruption in the telepathic cipher of this community at the moment, because that these we're receiving the signs of frustration from the kinfolk around us, from the kinfolk talking loud with the guise and the pretense of intoxication. We're getting it from the chirp chirp of the vehicles in the parking lot at 10:30 with nobody around, just those distant chirp chirp. We're getting it from the sirens. It's occurred periodically over the past hour or so, but now, like, we're getting the whoop whoop from the non-visible squad cars. So could have been an ambulance, could have been a police cruiser, but anyways, very similar to the vehicle just a week or so ago, rolling up and crashing into the tent. Just that vitriol, seemingly directly responding to the act, the mere act of me doing this. So we're observing this. We're processing it, and discerning what the nature of the harm is, what the nature of the dissonance is, how relevant it is to address it or to be concerned with it. How much of it is just my cat's got to deal with it. Because what else are we going to do? If we don't do this, it's even worse. So people might not want to accept that or believe that, but that's one of the awarenesses that we have, and one of the reasons why we do this. So continuing on, just whatever I was saying before, just fast forward to the point, which is LGBTQ is very genius in its strategies, very manipulative, very passive aggressive, extremely subtle. When we talk about thorough cultures, like people doing things thorough, we can talk about Scandinavia and the mathematics. I talk about 90 degrees, and it's very cerebral, it's very like cold-hearted in many ways, but at the same time, it's very calculating, and those calculations are very thorough. So there's a certain safety and comfort that exists when situating within the products of that culture. There are other cultures that are very thorough, and LGBTQ is also one of those cultures that's extremely thorough and digging up dirt, being manipulative, and prodding people and provoking people into response to be emotional, and then employing further advanced tactics in those emotional responses to gain leverage and further negotiation for the short term and for the long term. So, that being said, again, that's something that fits within the lines of what we were talking before about in terms of being of shadow bosses, and Brethren Dr. Umar Johnson being subjected to the influence and the policy demands from such shadow bosses. And that's one of the concerns, because how that one way of that playing out is with Brethren Dr. Umar Johnson's very outspoken personality and spokesman role. He's in a position to say certain things, to communicate a de facto policy, de jure policy, I guess it would be one or the other, that is not sanctioned specifically, exclusively by another community, by any community. So what we're saying here is, in that capacity, within the platform that Brother Dr. Umar Johnson has, For him to be so militant and speaking about and throwing cats under the bus categorically, but then not applying that same scrutiny towards the atrocities committed by LGBTQ, particularly against black young boys. There is a contradiction, to say the least. So that's what we're going to articulate now. Whatever positive we had at the moment to begin with, it's waned at the moment. So we'll just say Daybreak and Gambaro. Alhamdulillah, Ar-Rahmani Ar-Rahim, Allah Wabha, Dao Ke, Dao Fe Chang, Dao Ming Ke, Ming Fe Chang Ming, Ja Rastafari. Deus nos daqui essenciale Santa Fakita Namentum, Vaheku Salam. Baruch Ata Elohim, Elohim Melech Halam, Shehekon Hiya B'Diavarom, Amen. Kyrie eleison, Sivamas tu Savjgatahi, Sabe Sata, Bavanta Sukitata, Vagabiyam. Aqua ba upendo namani fakiri na sanami chinta dandra me libav me wumjaga umbuda shubanda fakika shishan kama sunina damo arigata pelama yellow waka toka toka lokshin go and come and go. Thank you for all the buses. Ata jamia yata fanami. Ado shanti man. All thanks and praise the Most High Elohim. Blessed love and peace of Rastafari.